G'day, guys. Am I on? Just working. Hold on. G'day, guys. Another light. Hold on. Stop that. Wow. Another afternoon. Good to see you guys. Yeah, I was just having some damn audio problems. I don't know why. It was sort of going off and switching to my other sort of audio thing in the actual laptop, and yeah, I sort of sorted it out. So I'm coming across pretty well now, hopefully. Let me just go back and see. Vane was first. That doesn't surprise me, Vane. You know, that doesn't shock me anymore. Absolutely doesn't. You know, that's a given. If you didn't turn up first, I'd be concerned. I'd really be concerned. Followed by Kate, close second. Time passes. Yeah. One's still here. Yes. Especially when you're having fun with audio. It's one of those cases. Yes. Fellow meatheads of the meat militia. Copyrighted by Bark K, just in case he's in the vicinity and he gives me a hard time. Yes, it is. Yes, it is, guys. It's good to have you guys here. That was my message earlier for everyone. Okay, Luke. One of those late nights, mate. Well, you know. Thank you, Shell. Oh, that's nice. That's really nice. I'm an uncle. Oh. Hi, Jared. Good to see you. At least the audio now is working. My internet's up to speed as well, which is really good. I actually did a test earlier. So, because my screen used to be quite appalling in that regard. So, why am I not getting the other tab? Okay. It's not coming up. Where is it? So there's my. Is it going to work? So as you can see, it has improved quite a bit. The upload used to be about 1 megabit, so it was damn slow as. So it's, had a whole lot of problems. Now, that's not my internet service provider. They don't have as fashionable that's the main provider, and they have most of the data centers in the country, so most of the traffic goes through those data centers. So, pretty much gives you a pretty good performance. So, and from 10 megabit download, I've gone to 46.7. Whoopee, great. So I'll be able to download content faster, which is good. But the main thing was the upload stream. It was, you need really about 4 megabits at a minimum to get good. Even though I had turned down the audio settings, the video settings, and a lot of other things that were just, it was still, as Jared called it, the robotic, or so it was useless. So for extra $10 a month, which is $2.50, one less coffee a week. Basically, I'm getting much better speeds now, better streaming performance, and also when the refresh happens on YouTube, it actually happens faster, and also some of the content that I can put up will actually work much better. So I will test at some stage some other stuff just to see. So you may see me late at night testing things just to see whether I can improve on a couple of things here and there. Good, good. I'm hoping you are. Okay, I'll remove that. It's gone. Yes. I was just actually checking, just before that, I was actually checking our local air quality. I don't know whether people have in their vicinity something similar. I'll just show you what ours looks like, just, you know, if anybody's got any. Oops. So let me just bring that up. Yeah, where is it? So we've got like a local air quality from the Hobart EPE, and it actually looks at particulates, you know, especially with fires and stuff like that. So the fire one is the red one, and the blue one is our sort of local. That's just up the road here. I'm not very far away from Newtown. I'm in sort of North Hobart suburb, so anybody that knows Hobart knows the area. It's just above the restaurant district. So it's a nice area. It's in a city. So for a person that lived for quite a few years in sort of rural areas, it's a bit of a shock to the system. But I was born in a suburb, but I was pretty young at the time. But you know, you get used to it again. Everything's close, which is a bit of an advantage. But yes, it's probably the only thing that's quite enjoyable. I was sort of looking at a few other things today, but let's get on with today's program. So it'll just be a general Q&A, nothing special. You know, people can just bring up things. I'll just cycle through these quickly until we can hit some questions. Bloody hell, that's early. Good to see you, mate. God, must be pretty early there as well. Jared's in Canada, and he's it's quite early where he is from what he mentioned last time. Yeah, it's way better. Was well worth the extra $2.50 a week. One less coffee, you know, a bit less oxalate juice. So yeah, look, it's, you know, the upload speed is 20 times. So because it really didn't actually perform to 1 megabit, it was about 0.9. So it was, yeah, I tried all sorts of things, and eventually I realized I had to upgrade. It just wouldn't work any other way. Live streams would just be very, very poor in that regard. On the Wim Hof method. That's the guy that actually swims in the frozen sort of ice and stuff like that. And I mean, cold exposure has benefits, like hot exposure has a hormetic effect. So it will upregulate, you know, glutathione. It does have effects on improving cardiovascular performance and a lot of other things. There's a lot of benefits that have been shown in that. I mean, traditionally, humans would have exposed themselves to hermetic stresses in the environment, so it's good. The problem is, for a lot of us, we live in cities, high EMF, high blue light sort of exposure that we're constantly. I mean, sometimes you guys see me at night. I've got the blue blocking glasses on. Last time, you know, and but even then, you know, I mean, you've got melanopsin all over your skin. So you're still getting in. I use the sort of the program F-Lux that actually lowers the blue light out of my laptop and a monitor, side monitor. But turn off all the try to turn off the lights or cover them, or stuff like that. It's a hassle, and it's a problem. If you're watching TV at night, long sleeves, even in you can buy really cottony type, that may help a bit. But the reality is we were designed and we evolved in this environment where we're exposed to constant light, and our circadian rhythms regulated with that light. So our food is regulated by that light because there are melanopsin in our gut. So when those nutrients go in there, they release light that was captured, and that light basically has an effect on not only giving us energy, but at the same time, signaling the sort of the circadian rhythms and all that. And I think I've mentioned last chat about how to biohack, in a way, your circadian rhythms with food if you're a shift worker or stuff like that. I mean, I mentioned today on Bart's thing about travel, really important that when you actually get to the destination, you fast, you don't eat. And when you get to your destination, let's say you get there early in the morning, you just don't eat until you get to midday. Or if you basically get there late at night, you just go to sleep, fast, wake up in the morning, and then, mid-morning, then have a meal. So to be in sync with a new location, circadian rhythms, because that food will go into your gut, that light signaling will reset your circadian rhythm and reset you to that location that you've just gone to. Obviously, it's going to be a major hassle if you're going from one location to another location to another location one day after another, or 1 or 2 days if you're doing conferences or stuff like that. That really can mess you up in that regard. But most people will go to a location. You'll reset yourself much better to that location, and you'll feel much better. So that's a bit extra beyond the cold thermogenesis stuff and all that. But, I wouldn't be doing that radical stuff. Just occasionally have a cold shower. That's what I do sometimes. It's a struggle, I can tell you. I don't last very long. Mm. Just pop through some of these. Just good to see you guys. Look, I wouldn't say he's well, let's say he's an interesting character, and a colourful character. The world needs people like him, that basically push the envelope in some directions and sort of get us thinking and saying, okay, well, I didn't think of that. Maybe there's some value and benefit in that, in doing things like that. So it's sort of we should never close our eyes to anything. I mean, even some things that may seem on the surface wacky. I mean, if you go back when people were talking about light therapy and stuff like that, everybody thought that was wacky, but but we've sort of realized there's a lot of studies now in science, and things have sort of moved in a direction where we've realized there are certain benefits. But then again, people that are living in rural areas that are less exposed to the sort of, well, unless you're in, like corn production areas where there's a lot of chemicals and stuff like that, you may be exposed to far more stuff. It depends on your circumstances. But if you're doing too many hormetic things and you're feeling lousy, you just need to cut back on doing those things. There is doing too much. Yeah, yeah. Look, breathing work actually is really good. I think I mentioned it last time about how you can lower your blood pressure quite a bit with good yoga type breathing exercises, and affect the parasympathetic side. So you can actually calm your nervous system, which is really good. Especially, sometimes I actually do it at work. I'll be honest with you, I'll literally, if somebody's pissed me off and I'm really, about to just put my fist through something, I will walk out, I'll go to the toilet, and basically, I usually try and find a place where there's nobody around, or I'll go to the roof area. Luckily, I've sort of got access with a mill key, and I'll just basically do my breathing exercises, calm myself down, and I feel much better. Then I walk back, get on with it. So they do work, and our work environment, especially I work in a corporate environment, and you're always going to get certain demands, certain people that trying to make themselves a name, or coming around trying to get stuff for you to do, and I sort of redirect them or tell them, I'm too busy. Go and see my supervisor if you're not happy. So I've been doing more of that because sometimes people do want to use you in the corporate environment to do things for them, which they then big note themselves about. So yeah, it's so I'd say breathing exercises are really important, and most of you guys, and it's really easy. I mean, I gave, actually a mate of mine, because I mentioned it to him years ago. I actually get, my younger sister can be highly strung sometimes, and I said, and a friend of mine gave her a book called Yoga for Dummies. Simple, nothing complicated, and there's plenty of YouTube stuff there if you don't want to actually cough up some money for something like that, to learn some techniques, which are very helpful. Believe me, in the sort of environment we are nowadays, we need a lot of de-stressing, calming down, relaxing, contemplation and things like that. It's not, it's not, weird stuff. We know it has actually a physiological effect. So yes, yep, yeah. I hope that some of that, biohacking with shift work is helping. You mentioned last time that you're actually feeling much better, that you're getting certain results. My sister got a lot of results as well when she was doing shift work as well, doing some of those little biohacks. The coffee one really helped her, and then the nap, which you just put a timer to wake yourself up. So you do a short term, sort of 10, 15 minutes, and then sort of wake up and then get into it. So it's really good. The critical part for shift working is definitely the circadian rhythm of eating. That's really important, because you're really setting yourself up for failure or a lot of health problems if you're not eating within the proper circadian period, which is sort of 11:30, 11ish, 11:30 to early evening. You've got to stick to that food area, and then the other times fast, even if you're working in those times. It's really critical. I can't emphasize that more for people that are doing shift work or staying up late doing work or working on something. Just consume water. Simple, simple. There, water. It's nothing complicated. It's a refreshing, bit of salt in it. That's the stuff that I use. It's easy. Anyway, I've got some sausages later on to get into, so they're going to be enjoyable. Can you go into details on what are the mechanisms which EMF can harm us? Well, it's basically the actual the frequencies actually have an effect on your melanopsin. They affect and interfere with the water molecules in your body and stuff like that. So I will do something, because that's a long discussion which requires to show things and stuff like that. but they do have an effect. They also, the tight junctions within your mitochondria are actually opened up as well. Certain fatty acids within the saturated range can actually close those down as well. So a species-specific diet has a positive effect on those EMF effects as well. So it's really important to, sugar is definitely not going to help you in a high EMF environment because it just exacerbates the problem, let alone it creates all these reactive products as well. So, supercharges the mitochondria that are basically being made vulnerable from EMF, and then, it just goes on and on and on from there. So that's a long, long conversation, but I will make a video on that. Stay tuned. Yes. Yes, it does. Shift work. She just said that it puts on weight, and that it's because it puts out of whack your circadian rhythms, and it, and so the other biohacks of time and the time eating and all that do help in that regard. And because you're up at night and you're fasting and you're working, you're only drinking water and snake oil, snake juice and stuff like that, it tends to actually help with the weight side of things. So in that regard. Yeah, Osma, look, just mentioning about that he's done some of the breath things, and and the cold exposure. Look, it's good. It's good to, you're also mentioning there that fetching post barefooted, even if it's minus 15 degrees. Yep, that has hermetic effects. Also grounding, which is really important. So you're going to reduce. You're going to improve your platelet aggregation and that negative charge in your arteries. So that's really important as well. So it's all part of lifestyle. These things, they all help in that regard. That's right. He definitely is eccentric. That's true. I've actually seen him, and he sort of sits like he's a yogi or whatever. And he's definitely eccentric. That's probably the best way to describe him. Yes. Look, cold and heat. They're good hermetics. In that regard. Yes. That's what. Oh, okay. Probably is. And Necro Kitty. What type of exercise and breathing work would help bring out the breath easily when active? Breathing exercises. Look, I usually, before I go do any exercises, I do some breathing exercise, but I usually do them post in that regard, just to bring everything down and sort of relax it. But usually about half an hour later. I don't really do any going into, sort of more, if I, the sort of nutritional side than anything else. It's usually I'm trying to sort of, calm myself down and stuff like that. So, for the cortisol side, I'll actually have snake juice after. So bringing down sort of my cortisol levels from the post, but I'll actually do it. I'll give myself about half an hour, because you need that little stressor. You don't want to go straight into stopping all this sort of stuff. The whole reason for the hermetic effect or the hermetic stresses is to basically get the benefit of that hermetic effect. So it's probably, you probably want to be looking at about half an hour before you start in terms of the hydration side, and then probably an hour later on when you're looking at the sort of calming down yourself, because by that you want to calm yourself down, because by that stage also you want to shift to consuming certain calories to build new tissue and stuff like that, because it's usually post exercise that you're actually building rather than while you're doing the exercise. That's when you're tearing down tissue. So it's really sort of timing in that regard. You don't want things too close, but you don't want things too separated as well, for best sort of results. But really, if you're going to, the moment you go into feeding, I would do those sort of deep exercises and all that. And you can find them on the, I'm not going to demonstrate it because some vegan is probably going to get that and then try to use it to ridicule me. So just go to some other person's site that actually shows that, demonstrates that deep sort of breathing in, and then where your diaphragm, that top part just pops out, and you want that sort of, you want a lot of air in and then breathe it all out with intensity, so and you do that, and then you sort of just relax and calm down, and eventually that sort of your heart rate will come down and all that much more faster. Not initially, because doing that activities is actually putting strain on the body, but then it all sort of calms down. That explains things. My father can't exercise, and I believe he's losing muscle mass as he ages, especially in his legs. I've suggested that he ups the protein. So would I. Definitely. My father's got a bad knee, but I've got him little weights. So while you can't do exercise, you can actually sit in a chair and use little 1.5 kilo weights and just work those. You don't need to necessarily, and you can also get, I don't know what they're called, these little, like a pressure type device where you can put your legs on, and you can actually, there are two types you can think of. There's one like a pedal thing. There's one where you're actually pressing in the pedals, and there's another one where you can actually compress it downwards with your feet. So you got your feet on and just pushing down onto it, and it actually pops back up, and then you push it down, and that can also help somebody that's actually immobile, back problems, or all sorts of other things. So there are things that you can actually do to help your dad. I got dad on to consuming more meat, and that was a struggle because he was more into seafood and a lot of other things, and eggs, vegetables and stuff like that, which was, and dairy, a lot of dairy. But you really need red meat. You really need a lot more red meat in your diet. And it's, now that he's actually shifted, he actually has regained probably about 50% of his muscle mass in his arms. So his muscles have come back because there was a lot of atrophy there. And my father used to have big muscles because he was a boilermaker welder before he got into small business. And he used to have muscles. They were just, these are sort of, get this out of the way. These are sort of my muscles, and his were about, something like that. It was just like a muscle that wide. It was just ridiculous. And you didn't want to challenge him with an arm wrestle. He always won. And even when I was in my 20s and doing and lifting weights, and I just couldn't win. He was built like a shit brick house. He was strong. They built them strong back then. Yes, so definitely you want to up the actual protein if there anything you can do. It's hard with people that have gone through that generation where they were exposed to a lot of the propaganda about meat. But yeah, he needs to sort of up it. Definitely, it's the only way, and do a lot. And you don't need to basically heavy workouts. As I said, my father regained a lot, because if you've got muscle, and this is really important, that those myonuclei that are actually, you build over time, that I mentioned last time. So if they build into the tissue, and you can actually, if you haven't seen I think you you were here last time when I was doing my live stream, and I actually showed the study, and I actually described these actual you know, nuclei will build up in the actual tissue, and your body actually, your muscles actually have like muscle memory. They will come back. So as long as you basically feed them the proper species appropriate foods, and you do the proper type of exercises to, get them to respond, and they'll respond. So, let me know how it goes, because my father had positive results, and a number of other people that he's actually mentioned it to in the Greek community have tried those techniques, and they've actually seen similar results. So, yeah, I hope it works for your dad as well. That's good. Not eating past. I mean, I tend to, because I sometimes work a bit late, and by the time I get home, I just whack on a steak a couple of minutes on each side, and then have it. And so I tend to basically 7:30 by the time I have my meal. So it's probably not optimal or ideal, but I tend to go later to bed as well. So um, yeah, but it's definitely not entirely ideal. But yeah, for me anyway. Psst. I am by big water. Nah, not really. I mean, I don't recommend large, heavy consumption of water. Drink. I mean, we're having pretty much hot weather at the moment in the eastern part of Australia. So we're sort of hydrating a bit more, but I don't. I don't drink. I don't consume. I drink to thirst. And the other thing that I don't do is, because there's a lot of deuterium in water. Yeah, not good for your mitochondria to consume liters and liters of the stuff, unless you're in the high air, like high elevations where there's more fractionation, where there's more UV that's actually affecting the water molecules and actually depleting, or you're not as lazy as I am, and you basically put your water out in large containers, so UV radiation can actually just go through them all day long for a couple of days, and then consume the water out of that, which means it'll have slightly less deuterium in it, which is a bit of an overkill. Or you can just consume more animal fat that will displace that deuterium in your body. You need more animal fat to basically displace, with better quality metabolic water that comes from, the protein gradients out of fumarate hydratase. So it's really important. That's through complex 2 in the inner mitochondria. But yeah, it's really fat. That's the most important thing, to hydrate yourself with. 1 gram of fat will give you 1.1 mils of metabolic water. You get 10% more than you put in. That's why you don't feel thirsty when you consume more fat. Sugar, on the other hand, is 0.44. So you're not only putting more neutrons in there that are basically causing more damage to your mitochondria, but at the same time you're displacing metabolic water. You're reducing the amount of metabolic water that's available to the mitochondria and to your body. So you're actually putting far more growth factors and stress on your body. So yeah, but yes, I wish there was. Oh, it'd be interesting. Big water. Yes. Unfortunately, because I don't promote them, I'd be getting bugger nothing from them. I just go through these. Yeah, I know. It's laughable. Big water. God. That'd be big. That'd be big fat. Moist checks. God, pretty piss poor comedy. Yeah, I know. The thermal effect of meat. Well, that's a given. More protein usually to break down protein. You're going to be using a bit more energy, and as a consequence, that will have a thermic effect. It's sort of a given where sugar just goes in, and fat's a bit slower. It goes through the lymphatic system, but unless it's basically through the portal vein, unless it's if it's short chain fatty acids and medium chain triglycerides, they will end up via the liver. But it depends on how much of that you get. Will depend on whether you're consuming coconut oil, dairy products. Remember, dairy products have a lot of MCTs and short chain fatty acids in them. So that's another factor why in the past, when people were consuming more dairy and some carbs and all that, a lot of that was being converted to ketones. And so the sort of the Randall cycle gradient was much lower. So when we shifted to vegetable oils, the gradient changed. So that's when people started getting fatter much quicker, at a much quicker rate, even though they still hadn't got onto the high carb component yet. So, and that's, again, you've got a number of elements there. You've got the fats that are used, so there's a lot of things there. Now, Harry, do you think some small amounts of plants, probably cooked or fermented, might be valuable as a source of minerals like magnesium? Not really. There's shitloads of minerals in seafood and a lot of other animal foods. And remember that your requirements for minerals actually go down on a carnivore diet. Like your vitamins, you don't need as many transcripted enzymes, and conversions to actually happen. This is the thing with plants. The more plants you consume, the more you have to transcript a whole lot of these little nanomotors, machines, to go in there and break down and convert a lot of the things that are in plant form that for the body to assimilate need to be converted to the animal form. And so you require far more nutrition, like double the vitamin B1, thiamine, far more magnesium, far more potassium, all these things go up as a consequence. So I don't see a lot of benefits. Where I see some benefits is the hermetic effect. Like some herbs and spices can actually have some really good hermetic effects, and our ancestors knew that and used them as medicinal for medicinal purposes and stuff like that. Now, will small amounts of plants, shorten your life? No, especially if they're low glycemic, fermented and stuff like that. No, they won't. That would be ridiculous to argue that. Are they suboptimal? Yep, in terms of nutrition, but will they actually? People can still actually probably not thrive optimally, but still live quite a long years with suboptimal nutrition. I mean, as long as you're not oxidizing yourself, you're not damaging your tissue and stuff like that, and you're undertaking some fasting and clearing out the junk and stuff like that, you can actually still live long lives, and there's plenty of populations that we can point to around the world. So, I mean, it's a much more complicated picture. It depends on what you want to do with your life, how optimal you want to be, the sort of strength that you want to have. You're not going to get the strength if the more plants you consume, you're not going to be as strong physically. But do you need to be physically strong to live long life? Not necessarily. Is strength protective? Yes, it is. So, I mean, you just have to see people that have got weak bones fall down, break their hips, and in a short amount of time, they're dead. But if that same person that was suboptimal didn't break their hip, they possibly could have, if they had a low inflammatory type diet, generally not high in refined sugars and stuff like that, and were doing some physical activity, and whatever sugar they had, they were burning through or converting it to glycogen. Yeah, they're going to be in a less inflamed situation. They, in a suboptimal way, yeah, they could live much longer. So it's, yeah, that's why we have all these differences. And plus, we've got genetic differences as well, which I've spoken about in the past, which is really important to take into consideration. Certain populations can manage things much better. I mean, Han Chinese, 76% can create endogenous choline. Fantastic for them. The majority of the populations around the world can't. It's very small percentages. That means they can deal with a bit more sugar, which basically means that they can actually deal with much higher homocysteine levels. They can methylate away those homocysteine, effects that most people around the world can't. So that's why I said you just ignore the homocysteine studies that come out of China. They're irrelevant for the rest of the world, just because of that unusual adaptation anomaly that exists there. But most people don't know about it. But that's why the vegetards use those sort of studies continuously. It's again misinformation. Again, they won't tell you, and even some of them know this information. It's not, Harry Serpanos only knows this information. Some of these people know this information. That tells you the type of people you're dealing with. Because they know this information, but they still misuse because they've got their own agenda that they're pursuing. So yeah, very important that people realize that, and we point this out. So because we've always had the China study and all sorts of things thrown at our face, even though it's junk epidemiology, but it's always thrown at our face. We need to throw a bit of ammo back in their face, so. Oh, look, people have all sorts of ideas about protein and fat in that regard. I think that it's not so much. A lot of people we get too fixated on protein and fat, or we get too fixated on the anabolic sort of side of things. I mean, even today's stream where Jack and sort of was sort of poo-pooing, for instance, fasting and all that and things of that sort. I sort of disagree with them. Good luck to them. If they want to pursue a life of zero fasting and stuff like that. Probably Steph is probably safer, and the reason for that is she's in much deeper state of ketosis. So she'd upregulate AMPK and all the other sort of pathways. And yes, you can from exercise get, autophagy as well. And that's true as well. There's plenty of studies to show that. But in order to clear out the cells properly, you do need some of the absence. You need the mitochondria to have a bit of a rest. So while you can get some material out, you can't get all the waste products out by just doing exercise. So you really need to take a rest. It's like, you give your brain a rest at night, you sleep in order to get rid of all that amylase. You get rid of all that junk that's in your brain, or give a rest to your body, your tissue, to actually recover. Like we too, I agree with Jack on the thing about, not doing too much exercise, giving, and even Steph, about basically giving your body a rest. Yeah, I've been saying that for some time, that people just exercise far too much. They're exercise junkies. It's just crazy. It's just so deleterious to your body. Your body needs time to heal, time to recover. This pulsatile effect between exercise, fasting, everything, it's what traditionally populations did, and you don't see, you look at these traditional societies, they were strong, robust people. And they basically practice levels of fasting. They, whether it was imposed on them from the environment or they had traditions because they knew it worked, it was healthy, So, I think they have a place. Chronic fasting is not a healthy thing. I agree with them, but to say that you don't need fasting, oh God, I think that's nonsense. Good luck to them, But if you take a look at most of the longevity populations around the planet, they follow calorie restriction and fasting practices and have for a very long time. And just because somebody thinks that they're an expert, I look at those traditions, there's more to be learned. And I'm surprised because, Jack, like myself, has an interest in, in Price's work, and Weston Price spoke about a lot of these practices that traditional populations did. So, yeah, I was sort of flabbergasted when he made that remark that he was quite opposed to fasting. But anyway, people have their own reasons. Maybe they've done chronic levels of fasting, and then they've basically gone back to eating properly in a sensible way, and then they've seen better results, and they go, oh, they just have a blanket sort of approach to fasting. No. As I said, if you're too catabolic for too long or too anabolic for too long, it's not a healthy thing. You need to swing in this pulsatile effect between these sort of states. So you need to have days where you really feast. And I have days where I really feast. I'll sit down and have big steaks and all sorts of things. And sometimes I'll really go like, what was it? I was at a mate's place. We had a barbecue, and I probably went through about one point, it's getting close to 2 kilos of meat. So it was just right up to here. But, I don't do that every day. So you need to basically build at times, and but if people are basically always calorie restricting and doing intermittent fasting and just eating very small amounts of food and all that, yeah, that's still chronic fasting, that's bad. That's not good for you. That's unhealthy. Your body needs nutrition. So yeah, but getting back to the fat and protein side, probably think about ratios. I sort of stick to probably 1 to 2, 2 fat, 1 protein type thing. Generally speaking, that's sort of me. Sorry about rambling and going on about all these other things. Focus better on my breath, heavy body movements, push-ups. Yeah, look, a lot of that's helpful. You sort of, don't do too many, if you're doing like heavy, weightlifting and stuff like that, don't do too many isolated things. It's not healthy. Your body needs to naturally move and all that. I mean, on that part, the biohacker Ben Greenfield, I sort of agree with him, grab things, devices, move them around and stuff like that. Much healthier for you in the long run. Yes, probably a good idea. Yes, Dad is he's a tough cookie. Let's say he was a tough taskmaster with me as well as a youngster. God. God, there was any. I think my father enjoyed, if there were snowflakes around, he would enjoy crushing them. He was a very tough person to be around. There was no leniency. Push, push, do this. I was his personal slave. Welcome to a Greek family. So your dad hunted before and had a high percentage of indigenous DNA than me. So Brazilian type or Amazonian or background, I suspect. So I think you mentioned Brazilian last time. Yeah, look, tribal societies maximized caloric nutrition. That's what they maximized. That's what they focused on. It's not accidental. Just because basically the mega beast sort of dried up and the numbers dropped off, and we were forced into agriculture and domestication, doesn't mean that basically our species, the nitrogen isotope analysis of nitrogen 15 that Max Planck Institute in Leipzig, Germany, their definitive study on that, and they have some of the best sort of artifacts in terms of bones in the world. So, we were hunters, we were super and hyper carnivores. So it's really important that we get that message out. Even our closest chimps. I mean, I did, if anybody wants to see that, the one that I did with Bart on chimps, it was sort of focused on showing them that in the wild, ignore the veg tarts, the one down in Nigeria, the, sort of center, which is run by veg tarts and all that. And you got the monkeys squabbling about the over the termite mounds because they're trying to get to animal protein because they're not giving them enough, and literally having to stop wars amongst the chimps in the center. It's just freaking crazy. Again, their species specific diet is more meat, and they need more meat to support those fast twitching fibers in their muscles. So yeah, go and check out if you ever get a chance to on Bart's channel, Bart K's. There's one that I've actually done there on chimps, on chimp physiology, and it's sort of an insight, and definitely is good ammo against the vegans as well, because they're still peddling the lie that chimps don't eat meat. Garbage. Oh, deuterium. Deuterium is basically a stable isotope of, so, okay. You've got hydrogen, which most people know, which is a proton in the middle and an electron, that, a single electron. Now, what the difference is with deuterium is it's the second on the periodic sort of table of hydrogen. It has basically double the weight, and it's basically the proton in the middle has a neutron attached to it. So in the nucleus, and still an electron around, sort of a hazed type state. And when you observe it, it goes into a different superposition, but that's a quantum mechanics. But this higher, this heavier type of stable isotope of hydrogen is basically in different foods, in different amounts, from smaller amounts to larger amounts, depending on the food, in water, and a whole lot of other things. So, for instance, when you're looking at sort of fats that you find in fish, as an example, they sort of tend to be between, because different fatty acids have different types of concentrations, so they'll move between about 100 odd, 102, I believe, right up to about the 110 sort of parts per million. So it's in parts per million, and sort of fats that that basically in sort of animal flesh and all that will gravitate on average between 100 and is it 8 or 7? I can't remember now. To about 115, that sort of range. Because remember, there's in animal fats there are also things like there's a lot of monounsaturated fat. And monounsaturated fat has more deuterium than the saturated fat. Saturated fat has less. In that regard. So it's the composition, more saturated, less saturated, So in the, if it's more mono, like olive oil, which is about 130 parts per million, so it's got more mono in that regard. It's also how plants tend to concentrate in the fruit far more, so that's another factor. And fruit can't deplete. It's where the plant concentrates the actual amount. So there is some differences between the mono in animals compared to the mono in plants, but because the animal is eating sort of plants and getting those sort of things, and then that's composing, there is some level of depletion in the animal when it's actually eating this sort of stuff. Nobody's actually measured any of this stuff of what the depletion rate is. I couldn't tell you. I've got no idea. The only thing I can tell you is what the level of parts per million are within these foods. So, so your olive oil would be about, and most sort of those oils like, avocado oil or whatever, or avocados, it'll be around about that range, because of the fruits. So that's where it concentrates. It'll be about 130 parts per million. 130 below is where you want to be. Okay. And you don't want to be below 100 either. It's unhealthy because it's too catabolic, not enough growth factor in there. So it actually plays a role as a growth factor. So you don't want too little. You don't want too much in terms of that. That's why, I usually say to people, they turn to me and say, "Oh, can I use olive oil?" I go, "No, why would you bother?" I mean, you want to be sitting in that sweet zone between probably about 110 to 115. The more animal fats you consume, you'll be within that sweet spot. So for your mitochondria, the most optimal is eating animal fats in that regard. I mean, dairy is slightly higher because it does have sugars in there. So it tends to be, around the 125 to 120 odd. It can drop a bit further if it's clarified butter, for instance, because you're getting rid of a lot of the actual sugars in that regard. So it's clarified ghee is better than butter in that regard. But then again, I sort of balance because I consume a lot of seafood, which is much lower. And so even though I have a bit of dairy, I sort of counteract that and sort of bring that. So when you average out the two, it sort of goes into the same level as animal fat would be. So as long as you're sort of balancing those things out in that regard, your composition should be okay. So that's basically the what deuterium is. It's just basically a stable isotope of hydrogen that actually has that addition in its nucleus. It has that neutron, So, and if it has two neutrons, then it becomes even heavier, and it's called tritium. That's what they use in fusion reactors, like tokamak reactors. And that's very unstable, but gives you a lot of energy. Not you necessarily, but you know what I mean. if they ever get it happening one of these days. Yes, I hope that's sort of try to keep it as simple as possible. And obviously, in your nanomotors, when they rotate, there will be some neutrons that will come through, a very small amount, and they will slow down. So that's not working too fast, and it's not working too slow with too many, or being damaged with too many. So it's sort of that sweet spot in its rotational speed to basically give you what you need in terms of energy. So it's, as long as I said, a lot of things have to be in the sweet spot. It's like zero sugar, you're dead. You still need a certain amount of sugar, for your brain, your red blood cells and stuff like that, and other parts of the body. But, too much has to be within that nice sweet spot. Animal flesh is in that sweet spot. I think I've covered that in those terms. Too many neutrons, affecting your nanomotors in your mitochondria is the problem. Plus, by affecting your nanomotors, you are pushing growth pathways because you're not dealing with that excess energy coming in to utilize it, because you're slowing down your nanomotors or damaging them. So you can't burn it, you'll store it. And if you get to a certain level of inability to utilize oxidative phosphorylation, then you will push that cell towards cancer. So definitely not a good thing to consume foods that are very high in deuterium. Obviously, UV will deplete, which is a good thing. But, if you want to be optimal, you want to be in the sweet spot. And the other thing is, the worst carbohydrate is obviously fruit. Yes, fruit. Yeah, that sort of stuff that everybody tells you should be eating because it's so damn healthy. The keto people tell you that. The vegetards tell you that. The nutritionists tell you that. It's like they want to bloody kill you, don't they? Really damage your mitochondria. Yes, such nice people. Mm-hmm. To be honest, Jared, I do not know. Now, Jared's actually asked about groundwater and well water and bore water. I think bore water is actually better. And I think because of, not bore water, well water in higher elevations, or that is sourced from higher elevations, is better. Because bore water usually is in lower elevations, which is just seeped through the soil and stuff like that. And the reason why well water from higher elevations is better is because of that fractionation. So as it's actually coming from those higher elevations, it's actually being fractionated by UV, and that's probably better. But it's not, because you're also in wells and around, you're still getting some rain, which is mixing. It's not as good. But then again, as I said, if you're in the Mediterranean, you're in a hot environment, or in the tropics, you're going to get some depletion with UV. You're consuming more fish. You're going to get very low deuterium type sources. So even if you're drinking much larger amounts of water due to to prevent dehydration and stuff like that, and because you're sweating far more, one can counteract the other. So, I tend to, when I'm in the tropics, to focus on low deuterium type foods and combine them with water. So I think it's, and also expose myself more to the sun. So And that doesn't mean that I'm not consuming on the occasion when I'm in the tropics. You're going to go out with friends, and and even my partner, she consumes that sort of stuff. So she'll basically pressure me to have something like, some sort of, one of those healthy fruit juices. Yeah. I usually don't consume it all, just to keep her happy. Things we do. Look, precisely. The more sugar you consume, the more thirsty. You can do that experiment yourself. I mean, it's not difficult. If you consume more, you do a day where you just a week where you're just consuming a lot of sugar and less fat, and you'll feel a hell of a lot thirstier. And you can see it. Most of the vegetards out there, they're constantly consuming water because they are consuming so much damn fruit that basically they are depleting themselves of good metabolic water, and so they need to, even the actual water that they're taking, and some of them actually put it out on a ledge, and they're in the tropics like freely and put it out, and they're probably depleting some of it, so it's probably better than the fruit that they're having in that regard. So yeah, it is all funny when you actually look at it and you go, yeah, I know what's happening. Yes, it's does make a big difference. You're messing around. You can't see the stream. Okay. Good luck sorting it out. So you usually drink more than average. Look, on the occasion, you're basically going to get thirsty, but if you consume more fat, you won't get as thirsty. As I said, you're always getting about, from every gram, you're getting about 10% extra, and that will help. That will help quite a bit in that regard. Yeah, look, if it depends, as I said, how thirsty, because there is a threshold where if you're doing a certain amount of exercise and stuff like that, Jared, you're sweating, and then you're in a hot environment as well. That's why I usually say to people, why are you exercising in a hot environment? Do it in earlier hours or later hours. It's actually healthier because you're getting more UVA, and you're actually getting more of the, especially in the late afternoon as well, you're also getting exposure. You're getting away from the sort of exposure of blue light, and you're getting out there and getting more red light coming through. So it's actually way healthier for your body in that regard. And at the same time, you're not going to sweat as much. So, yeah, I mean, our ancestors basically were persistent midday hunters. Yes, that's true. But at the same time, they consumed a lot of animal fats. And so, and they were out there depleting deuterium with the actual sun, and they consumed a lot of the animal blood and stuff like that. So, they weren't out there putting down, the sort of 90% domesticated crap that we eat now that didn't even exist back then. So, it makes a big difference in that regard. Good guy. So, Nikki, Necro Kitty is just asking about whether there's deuterium in distilled water. Yes, there is. So she actually distills, and it gives you, distill my tap water because it gives you diarrhea normally. I don't know what's in your tap water, cunt. Mineral water and electrolytes, they're useful. They're good. Most of our soils are depleted of minerals, so they have their role in that regard. But pretty much, if you're getting sufficient fat, you don't really need to concern yourself, and you drink to thirst, you shouldn't have, you should be fine in that regard. People only should concern themselves if they're consuming too many carbs. That's when they're actually overloading their body with deuterium. That's the only time it's going to happen. Obviously, if you're eating a junk food diet, that's even worse. Remember that refined oils, the seed oils, all those wonderful things like the canola oils and the rapeseed oils and all that wonderful stuff that the fast food industry uses and all the packaged food manufacturers use in their products. Now, all that crap, that's close to double that of, refined sugar in terms of deuterium. So the concentrations are really high. And so that's one reason why it's such a obesogenic type diet. It literally drives obesity. And it's really because it's slowing down the nanomotors. That's at the subatomic quantum level, it's the slowing down of the nanomotors and the inability for the cells to basically take up. So what happens is when you slow down the nanomotors, you're actually basically down-regulating GLUT4 receptors. You're actually down-regulating the, this is all part of insulin resistance. You're basically, deuterium is a controlling agent at the subatomic level of insulin resistance. So you slow down your nanomotors, you can burn less. The cell goes, stop. We don't want any more stuff. You got more circulating fat and sugar in your bloodstream. Eventually, that is the Randall cycle gradients that will go up. And as that goes up, you get into storage mode and you start storing it away to get it out of the, you need to bring your blood sugar down. You need to bring your fats, or, the body is starting to do all these things that it doesn't want to because it wants to actually utilize that energy, but, it can't. So it stores it away as a safety measure. And then if you don't have enough choline, you can't export it out of your liver. So you're fucked, So and that's the problem. And this is where all this dysregulation and all these things happen. It's just, but at the subatomic level, this is what's happening. Deuterium is affecting the rotational speed. And this is how you get, as you get older, you have less energy, but you're also prone to more illness. Again, your nanomotors are being damaged. You're losing mitochondria density. So the mitochondrial density is dropping, making you more vulnerable for cancer, making you more vulnerable, for a whole lot of other ailments, becoming weaker, less, So exercise will upregulate. Fasting will upregulate the biogenesis of new mitochondria. Certain fatty acids will cause reverse electron transport, increase the biogenesis. There are other things, substances. It's even a substance in chocolate that actually increases biogenesis of mitochondria. But it does have a lot of oxalates, so that's the downside of chocolate. But there's a whole lot of better approaches and strategies in that regard. Water quality is important. Don't get me wrong. I'm not against having good water quality and stuff like that. But the focus has to be, when it comes to deuterium, has to be on fat, animal fat in particular. I can't stress that enough. Embrace the fat. It will give you long life and healthy life and strong vitality. So is my message. I should actually Actually, Bart should actually make a T-shirt, "Embrace the Fat" or something like that, or "Love the Fat." Mm. I think I've covered that pretty extensively. Why it is because of the damaging effects to the nanomotors in the mitochondria. You know, the nanomotors are where ATP synthase happens. You know, that little energy byproduct, because that's what it is. It's actually, it's not. It's basically their shit we use for energy. In a sense, that's what ATP synthase is. It's their byproduct. They're more interested in basically creating metabolic water to create that transistor effect and actually work and be vibrant, because the little mitochondria want to be happy. And when we flood them with deuterium, they're not happy. They get broken. They get damaged. They start complaining and bitching and moaning. Mate, I work through the week, which is my biggest problem. Saturdays, I usually walk down to Salamanca and I meet with my friends and stuff like that. And in the afternoon, I usually have a bit of a feast at my sister's place. So I'll have to work out some new arrangement because she's about to leave the state. So she's leaving me. Oh well. Better opportunities work-wise for her. So anyway, good luck to her. But I will miss her. And then, really Sunday's my only day. And, Pim starts in the morning, then Bart, then myself. I give myself about an hour in between, 1 or 2 hours in between, depending, because Bart sometimes will extend his a bit longer. And I want to follow that as well because we're pretty supportive of each other in that regard. And it's hard. I mean, I have brought in a late, just let me know if which time zone you're in and stuff like that. So I've got an idea, because there's the late one that I do on the Friday type, which is a more evening one. And you'll see me with my trendy, they look like shit, but anyway, they do the job, blue blocking glasses. And it's it may actually suit you much better. I don't know. It's sort of one that I call the UK Euro and Australasian one, which sort of is a time zone which is much harder for a number of other people. Let me know what time zone you're in and whether that really suits you or not. Yep, pretty much. Yep, look, it's Shell's right about what you can absorb, and the rest is pretty much a waste of time. Yeah, it's just pretty much right. At the end of the day, your body needs certain nutrients. It needs proteins. It needs fats. It needs those as building blocks. It needs those to build cell membranes. It needs fat as energy. It needs the certain minerals and vitamins that are in those foods to basically regulate certain functions in the body. That's what it needs. A lot of the rest is superfluous. A lot of people waste too much money on supplements and stuff like that. There are things that I've talked about, like I will do on supplements, but it will basically be a lot of aminos. It's certain aminos that basically in certain substances that you can utilize here and there based on your genetics. I mean, that's an important role based on your eating patterns and stuff like that. But fundamentally, really, it's just getting good animal foods in. Diverse is very important. I do believe in diversity. I don't believe in just, muscle meat. I think it's not only the restrictive side of it. I'm not saying that people can't survive on muscle meat. Yes, they can. But is it optimal? No. And, there are other things that are very important. There's copper to zinc ratios. There's all sorts of things that are better balanced when you've got a mixed source of foods, and it makes it more enjoyable anyway. God, just eating muscle meat every day would be very boring. Well, I would find it anyway. But I'm not going to poo-poo anyone that does it. But I don't think it's the most optimal way of eating on a carnivore diet. So Luke is asking me whether I enjoy bodybuilding type exercises and stuff like that. I don't stick to machines. I do have some weights at home, and I actually work those and lift them. But I also do other things, like I'll go for walks. I'll literally try and lift things out in nature, try to push things and stuff like that. Do push-ups and all sorts of things, and sometimes go to parks in the evening when there's no kids around. You can't compete with kids, otherwise you'd look also funny. What is he doing here? And there's all those things like the bars and all that. You can sort of you utilize those as well. It's really good for stretching up your spine as well. So you really need to do those sort of things on the ground sort of type activities. So to like on grass, and sort of move your body around and do certain movements, which is really good. You're earthing yourself at the same time. You really want to maximize the movements of your whole body, in a sense. Way more healthier. When you're just doing isolated stuff here and there, that's what really creates more injuries. And it's something you can't do on a daily basis. People would do physical work on a daily basis on the land, go pull things, drag things, take a rest, do other things and all that. And they worked all those different muscle groups, where most people, when they go to a gym and they're doing all these isolated type activities, they end up creating more strain, more injuries and stuff like that. And they can't sustain it doing it on a daily basis. It just kills them. That should be telling you something, that it's not a natural way of working your body. Your body needs to work in a natural way if it's going to be healthier. You take a look at all the longevity people, like the Okinawans and whatever, put some weights on their back, that dig things up, that grab things, that move things and all sorts of things. That's what your body's supposed to do. It's supposed to have a full range of motions and movements to be healthy and vibrant and in good nick. Oops, overshot again. Go back. Trying to think a good way to ask this. Why do cultures look so different from one another? I've always thought that it's topography. Fundamentally, that it's topography that actually really is what creates a culture, and that topography has certain animals in it, has certain environments in it. You just have to take a look at the way the city-states in ancient times actually emerged in the Greek world, on the Italian peninsula, and in areas where it was very flat, and you had a lot of movement between different groups, larger groups. You actually had more bigger empires and kingdoms and stuff like that actually emerged. And so different type of class-based practices and structures, societal structures that affected those cultures. The Greek world had far less slaves, so you couldn't get efficiencies without actually innovation and improvements of the means of production within that society. Where in Rome, on the other hand, They just pretty much copied everything from Greece and the Etruscans, which they dominated. But they actually brought in, this is how crazy, they actually brought in legislation to ban labor-saving devices in the Roman world. That's what really put the brakes on the sort of industrialization that was happening within the Greek world when they took over the Greek world. I mean, things like, the Astrolabe, which was the first analog computer that was purported to have been developed by Archimedes. Heron of Alexandria that developed the steam engine, and a number of other, how to actually create sort of early programming languages, automation. Where he used the word automata, which is the Greek word for automatons, things that work on their own. But, when the Romans dominated that part of the world, they brought in this legislation because they had so many slaves. They didn't want the market value of the slave to be lowered, and they would lose, because things were valuable in that regard. When the Greek world, they had more citizens, less slaves. They had to basically upskill the slaves. That's why Greek slaves were highly prized and valued, because they were more skilled, and they used more labor-saving devices and stuff like that. So, the way cultures evolve and develop and all that, I'm just using that as an example, and societal structures develop, has a lot to do with topography and the limitations of that topography and what it can give you, the sort of material stuff. Concrete was developed in ancient Greece because basically 85% of the country is hilly and rocky and mountainous, and there was so much basically limestone and concrete and all these sort of materials around. That's what they used. So it's not that if there was another population there, they probably would have used the same materials and developed a very similar culture. So Greeks don't have anything genetically special about themselves. Neither do we. All came out of Africa. It's just basically your topography gives you advantages and disadvantages, and that actually evolves a certain culture and whatever else. You just have to take a look at, I'll give an example, Australian Aborigines. They came to a continent, they burnt the continent like the North American Plain Indians, created a lot of conditions for good tribal, societies to evolve and develop, good hunting grounds and stuff like that. And unfortunately for them, they couldn't develop any further because there was nothing to domesticate bar the dingo, which they domesticated, which was a sort of an indigenous dog that exists in Australia. Much harder to domesticate compared to the wolf, but they still managed to domesticate it. Most of the other animals that were on the continent, they just couldn't be domesticated. They were, those animals, and they still exist. The wildlife still exists, but they just couldn't be. But they could be hunted, and that's what they did. But they developed a whole lot of innovations. As an example, because kangaroos hop and can get away much faster than many other animals, they developed a new type of mechanism where the spear could be controlled in a sort of device and thrown at longer distances and with higher precision and velocity, so they could actually hit a kangaroo in flight as it was sort of hopping away in that regard. They also, for certain types of other animals that were a bit smaller, or they even used it against kangaroos, was the boomerang. And the boomerang is a very aerodynamic. That creates a lot of. You've got to be smart to create something like that. Dumb people don't create boomerangs. It's the aerodynamics of that are incredible. You throw it out, it comes back to you. That's innovation. That's great innovation. No other tribal societies around the world had those sort of innovations. They, in terms of innovations as tribal societies, they were ahead of their time, but they were limited by their environment. They couldn't go any further. Their environment limited them. They couldn't domesticate enough things in their environment, and they used a sort of like a horticultural type approach where they would take seeds of certain things and literally either trade them or use them in different areas. And so as a consequence, they were able to basically develop, some additional small amounts, not at sufficient surpluses to develop civilization, but small amounts to be able to trade amongst themselves, and small amounts to be able to provide some additional calories for themselves. So it was only, after Europe had developed and basically they colonized this part of the world and were able to bring their technology from there, their industrial technology, and cut down the forests and, develop the continent in a very different fashion. But, culture develops because of its environment, and latitude and longitude plays a big role as well. So the Eurasia developed because they're on a similar latitude. Latitude, that's right. They're on a similar latitude. That means you can move grains, you can move seeds, you can move a number of animals from one part of that Eurasia area to another part, and you can move populations and all sorts of across, Mongols, they were able to invade into Europe and took over China and all that. You can actually develop societies that, can quickly from a certain level go to another level because they can come into contact with different populations, and they're in a similar type of temperature zone and all that, and where the stuff that they utilize here can work over here as well. So that's important, where in Africa, on the other hand, you've got is different. You've got also, you've got basically this north-south thing. So you've got this longitudinal thing. So what works in one part work in another part. So the same. That's why you had in certain areas in Africa, like North Africa, you had some civilization. You had in Southern Africa certain civilizations that emerged. They did collapse, but they did emerge. In that central part, it was really hard because it was so tropical. The ability to move stuff, but in that sort of longitudinal way was really hard to conquer or movement. Even animals. I mean, I think I've mentioned this on the chimp one, that they were restricted because of this longitudinal effect as well. So there are topographical reasons that affect culture and the way culture develops, and obstacles. Once you get beyond a certain technological position, you can actually then utilize those, but you have to get there. If you can't get there, you can't. Somebody that comes from the outside that has already developed that technology and then can exploit your materials, then can develop that with you or against you or whatever, depending on, colonialism or whatever else. But this is how it actually works. It's, like the Arabs, the tradition of the Zoroastrians in Persia. They had a lot of oil that was seeping to the surface and burning off, but they couldn't actually exploit it until the modern era, when we developed, the petrochemical industry and all the technology to be able to exploit that. But they exploited the olive oil trade, because olive oil could be used to light up cities and whatever else, because it was an easy thing technologically to take advantage of. So everything in your environment, and that's why civilizations rise and collapse and all that, for all these different topographical reasons that can actually affect, and they affect your culture, the way culture changes and the way, people communicate these things amongst themselves. It's, I think I've gone a bit too far there, as I do, get carried away, but it's an interesting thing, and it's really, topography is the driver, the effect. The reason why industrialization happened in the Rhineland. Close to the surface there was coal. Close to the surface of in most parts of the UK, that central part around Liverpool, Manchester, close to the surface, there's coal. They got to that level of technology where they could have exploited that, things at their time. And then if it's close, it's easily exploitable, economically exploitable, it happens, and your world transforms, so it's, yes, we are, our culture is the product of our topography and the interaction with our topography in time, in time and space, in a sense. So I know that's a bit of a drawn out sort of explanation, but these things aren't easy to answer. Believe me, I could go on for hours, but this isn't this is for nutrition and other things. So we'll move on. Oops. That one. Okay. We all said about fasting. Thank you. Yeah, me too. I was sort of quite surprised. The sort of approach. We look at all longevity populations. There's not one longevity population that doesn't actually restrict feeding. You can't fill with cellular debris. I mean, even Bart's actually said it in past, the moment you put oxygen and any molecule of food into your mitochondria, into your cells, you're basically creating waste products. You basically are creating damage. Oxidative phosphorylation creates damage. Simple. But it also feeds us and it builds our bodies and stuff like that. But if you're constantly doing that, you're not giving, yourself a bit of a rest. It's like staying up all night, never sleeping. Well, it's not going to last for very long, is it? Things need to recover. Things need time, like with exercise, physical activity, whatever. Yeah, I was quite surprised as well, to say the least. I didn't want to get on there and start putting points and making an issue. It's Bart's channel. He's been very supportive of me, and he's a good friend. And so, it's his channel. At the end of the day, I don't believe that they are his personal views, because he does practice fasting. But at the end of the day, he brings different people on, which is good, and it's food for thought. It actually makes us think, and there are elements there about chronic fasting where I agree completely with Jack. The difference is, just because some people do that, or he did it himself to some extent, then to basically go to the other extreme of saying, it's bad, or it's not necessary, or, I think he said, was it not that it's bad, but unnecessary, or can be problematic, or he sort of wasn't very clear about that. And I don't want to put words into people's mouth, but it wasn't very complimentary on fasting, what they actually both said. So yeah, not my cup of tea anyway. I would say so. And I think it's some of those personal experiences sometimes people have that cloud their views about things. They may have mispracticed certain things, so that's part of it as well. It's a bit like Ansel Keys when he did his experiments, his Minnesota experiments on conscientious objectors, and misunderstood the catabolic effects and the downside effects of high sugar diets. He basically, because he restricted protein and these people got emaciated, and then when he restored the energy, the small amount of protein was sufficient to maintain muscle mass. He thought, oh yeah, you need more sugar. That's what's missing. So you can go down wrong pathways, misunderstand certain processes. So it's very easy to do that. That's why you sort of have to look. I always look at other people, what other people are saying, ideas and stuff like that, and then go, well, is that credible? You've got to question yourself as well. It's very easy to fall into those sort of traps. Believe me, I have in the past. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was quite clear, but at the same time, they were his guests. You've got to be respectful. I mean, even if somebody, I mean, I've been on chats, and my views about a number of things, and then I'm there, and somebody else says something different, and I'm a bit more diplomatic, and less, you know. So yeah, it's difficult, and I can understand. But at the same time, it also is important that we do hear different sides and different views and all that, and it gets us questioning a bit as well. So it's important, I would say. Now, I occasionally, once a month, I'll do like a sort of like a 3-day fast, but then I may not do it for quite some time. So I'm not. It's not a constant thing, Jared. I'll occasionally do, but I practice more time restricted feeding. So I will basically eat from around 12 o'clock onwards. I don't eat in the morning at all. I don't even have coffee in the morning. I just basically have water. My cortisol's high, so why am I having coffee? Yes, well, it doesn't affect fasting if it's just black coffee. At the same time, it's a stimulant. You don't need it. Your cortisol's doing the natural thing that it's supposed to do, and that's basically getting you up, waking you up, increasing your blood sugar levels, because that's what cortisol does. It does raise blood sugar, and it basically gets you ready to go, pretty much. And that's the whole purpose of it, and that's what you want it to do. So yeah, and then basically I sort of stick within the 6 to 8 hours, but I'll have days where I'll have restricted calories on that day. So it'll be basically a 16-hour fast with a restricted feeding, window, which, quantity of calories, and I'll may do that for one day or 2 days, and then the other days I may be consuming slightly above my calorie intake, and I mean sometimes it can be quite a bit, like 50% extra in that regard. So, that's what I'm building. I'm building tissue and all that, and I'm giving myself additional nutrients. So I don't go crazy about fasting. Sometimes, I'll 10 o'clock, I'll have a snack and a coffee, and say, no, I'm not fasting today. I'm just going to basically do about, 10 hours, 10 or 11 hours, and just a fasted period of 13 to 14 hours. So in that regard, so it's and by changing it all over the place like that, it's actually a good thing. Your body sometimes, if you do the same thing every day, it gets into the habit of thinking, you want to that little hermetic. It actually is a much better thing not to be as regular. But I try to stick between, the sort of 14 to 18 sort of fasted period, or time restricted feeding period. But I try to basically, within the 7 days of the week, I try to 2 to 3 days, I restrict the amount of calories I consume, and the other 4 to 5 days, depending, I up my calories. I eat more and all that, and that's good for your thyroid, good for your for that extra sort of energy. It's just generally, it makes you stronger and more vibrant and stuff like that. I find that if and I have actually done this, where I've actually restricted my time restricted feeding, but also my calories, just giving them the minimum amount that I needed for the day. And I have actually done that sort of experiment on myself, and I felt like crap after a couple of weeks. And that's what probably Jack did. He was probably just getting enough calories every single day, fasting, time restricted feeding, and just getting enough. And he probably did feel after a couple of months like absolute shit, and said, decided when he went back to eating more hours, he felt much better. But as Dave Feldman has actually shown that if you're on a carnivore diet and you're not time restricting sufficiently, you get higher blood sugars, higher insulin effect, higher C-reactive protein, and all sorts of other things, deleterious things. And he's actually shown that in his own experiments. That's why he says that you should be basically 12 hours you should be basically fasting for longer than 12 hours if you're on a carnivore diet. So he's actually done some of those experiments, and I would go more on that, where there's actually, and Dave Feldman, he's manic about his experiments and all that. He's spent thousands and thousands of dollars on doing these detailed experiments, and I would basically consider that more reliable than what Jack had to say. So in that regard, really important, guys, that you get enough nutrition in, but at the same time, you focus on, this pulsatile effect of, fasting or time restricted feeding and occasional fasts in, once a month or once every 2 months. See how it works for you, because people at different points in their life have more issues to deal with or whatever, may have too many stresses, and that can be a problem as well when you restrict feeding. So there's going to be nuance, and there's going to be differences between people. You need to play around with these things, your genetic differences and all sorts of other things. So just don't listen even to the Harry guru, not even to this, so-called, I'm not a guru, So, play around with yourself in terms of, don't play around in that way, no. But yeah, and try different things and see what really works for you, So at the end of the day, you need to be happy with the results, and you need to be, it needs to work for you, if it's not working for you, you need to sort of change things around, try a few different things. So you are Brazilian. I thought so. Dad's grandfather was probably a tribal elder. Okay. But not from from a different area. From the south. Okay. So closer towards, what is it? Uruguay and Paraguay, which is further up from the coast. Yep. Down in that sort of direction. Yep. Fair enough. Yeah, but still, they would have been, even in those sort of areas, even less fruit, even less access to that sort of stuff. So you're definitely more meat. Your father would be more close to those populations that had more access to meat than vegetables or other things of that sort, or fruit. Look, yeah. And that was just because you can't measure it. The exact amount and all this, and this is it goes back to the sort of, before they could measure LDL, didn't exist. It's the same. It just sounds nonsensical. We know it works. We know basically when you fast, it works. I mean, and rat studies are useless. Let's put it this way: rat studies are useless, and those rat studies actually, let's put it this way. I was going to say something, but those rat studies are basically, they're on a absolute shit diet and absolute shit nutrients that they're actually giving them, the controls and all that. And some of them have actually certain types that have got predisposed conditions to sort of fail in a sense. So they can actually see certain things, and then they can cut them apart and actually see what happened. So they don't really tell you much. I mean, even to get a rat into ketosis is nearly impossible. It's sort of like 90 plus and extremely difficult to try and get. So, their digestive system works differently on a number of fronts. Some of the enzymes that we've got, they don't have. I mean, I only see rat studies as one useful thing, that they can tell you whether something will kill you or not. Because as a mammal, if something kills you, you give it cyanide, it will die. That means another mammal should die again from the same thing. But you're not going to get a lot of knowledge from rat studies. It's sort of like a proof of concept, and then you have to do the clinical human study to basically work out whether, because there's been plenty of drugs that have worked in rats and then they've tried them on humans, and they had to stop the clinical studies really early because people were getting very sick. So if you rely on rat studies to determine whether you're fast or not, that's a bit of an issue. And you ignore all the anthropological, all the historical evidence of all these populations that have fasted from antiquity and even further back. What can one say? Yes. More or less. If you're on a species-appropriate diet, you've got nothing to worry about, sure, about deuterium. Okay. Harriet is asking me about what you take on coconut products. So you're talking about eating some coconut chips, stuff like that. In my keto days, and low carb days, I used to consume coconut products. I don't have an issue because I don't have a salicylate sensitivity. So most Mediterranean people have salicylate, the type of genes that actually allow us to eat salicylate foods. Most Northern Europeans don't. So I think that sometimes people can react badly. I don't know about your genetics. You'd have to basically look into it. If you don't get any reaction to it, you probably have some sensitivity. You're not sensitive, so to speak, to salicylates that are in coconut products. Look, whatever works for you. If it's not the worst food, and it is depleted in deuterium, so it's actually a healthy food in that regard. The only part of the coconut sort of franchise, so to speak, in that regard is coconut water. Don't touch it. Coconut water is extremely high in deuterium. It's higher than actual tap water. And the reason for that is that's where the coconut plant concentrates its deuterium. So as it's basically depleting, I can't remember the actual process that the coconut thing does it in. I can't remember now. It's a while ago that I read that. But anyway, the way it actually has to do with the actual, I think it's that sort of inner membrane of the actual coconut flesh. It actually seems to be able to, it pushes, it's a membrane, but it sort of goes one way, but doesn't go the other way, and sort of pushes the actual out of as it's developing, the actual fleshy part actually pushes through that membrane type into the actual water. the actual deuterium. So, and that's why it concentrates deuterium there, and that's why it gets depleted in the actual what we use to create coconut oil and stuff like that, the actual fleshy part. And so, yes, initially it was a waste product. People just broke the coconut open and just threw the water away. And most animals, when in the wild, they'll break the coconut. They will basically they won't drink. They avoid the water completely. So it's one of the worst of the worst. I mean, it's not as bad as seed oils. Don't get me wrong, but it's definitely worse. I mean, if you put a banana in front of me, as long as Freely wasn't around, because we'd have to fight over the banana, and a glass of coconut water, I'd go for the banana. I may have to knock Freely out to get it, but I'd go for the banana. So in that regard, yeah. So you have to be really careful with coconut products, because some of them actually they utilize the actual water in some of their processes. So yeah, that's why I can't recommend anything in that regard. Anything processed, you got to look into it. And there are people out in the keto community and other sort of communities sort of promoting coconut water as an elixir of youth and vitality. God almighty, that's how misinformed they are. So yeah, let your friends know it's not the best way of hydrating. Avoid it like the plague. And I mean avoid it like the plague. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, look, that's a problem. People read one study and they take a reductionist position on a lot of things. Things are much more nuanced. That's true. It's a lot of people do it because it's easy. With me, I try to nuance things and try to connect things and connect the dots, so to speak. It's always a tapestry of complications, and things can work differently in different environments and within different people and stuff like that. So it's complicated. It's like the choline side with the homocysteine side of the Chinese and the Europeans. So but if you listen to people, they go, "Oh, look at that study, look at that." I mean, oh, cognitive dissonance, and just sort of brainwashed and unable to look outside that little square, that little prison that they've put themselves in. I always question myself constantly. I know that we're dumb apes. We're basically friggin' dumb apes. I'm probably one of the dumbest apes out there. And I always question myself as well. And you got to question yourself. You got to check things. You got to make sure. You got to wonder. And and I double check things. And sometimes when I don't know things, I'll just say, "Look, guys, I need to look into it." I just don't want to give you an answer that basically is going to send you down the wrong path. And I'd rather say nothing and say, "Well, shit, I don't know. I'll look into it." And I want to hear all the sides of the argument, and I want to see, are they credible? On what basis? So yeah, you got to be. Reductionism is a very dangerous thing, believe me. I'd go for the pork crackling, as long as it's not cooked in seed oils. Some of the commercial stuff is, unfortunately. You're welcome. About the Cheryl just mentioned about that it was an in-depth explanation. Actually, I could have gone for hours, and it's very interesting. If people want things on specific cultural groups or tribal groups or stuff like that, let me know. May do a live stream just specifically discussing those sort of things. They can be interesting to some people. G'day, mate. It's good to see you. He's been on. Tero's been on from Finland. Has been on some of my other irregular live streams. So it's good to see him back. I hope I'm pronouncing your name properly. Tero Izorari. Hope so. If I haven't, just slap me down. So you got it wrong. That's right. We can actually detect the effects of autophagy, in that regard. And, when they take biopsies and all that, they can actually see differences. Yeah, but it's like a lot of things. We don't have the precision with a lot of things. It's just the way it is. Such is life. But but we shouldn't poo-poo things just because we can't measure things at this point. Yeah, look, the level of storage will depend on a lot of factors. What's your copper level? If you're basically fundamentally, looking at levels is not going to tell you, if it's. Look, I always say, as long as you're getting sufficient copper in there, then and your zinc to copper is balanced. Your ferritin levels, what you're storing as iron, and how you're actually utilize it in your body is going to be in a much better boundary, in a sense. I actually did put a comment on one of Frank Stefanos's. Let me just try and see if I can find it. Where's Frankie boys? Give me a sec. Oops. I like this gout one. That was colourful. There's a little king. I'll actually bring that up. That looks really damn funny. Oops. There you go. That he's like a little king with his gout issue. It was all that fructose that he was consuming and dysregulating himself. Now, where's he got the other one? It's pretty colourful. But he's got the time. Bloody hell, I wish I had the time to sort of where is it? Not sure whether it was that one. Give me a sec. No, I can't find it now. But anyway, what I did actually on one of his comments, I'll try and find it. I basically put down that certain seafoods that are their sort of combination that they have, the sort of copper to zinc type ratio, and that how you can sort of utilize that. I should be able to find in my history. Hold on, let me just take a look. Okay, history. Let me see if I can find it. Put up too many bloody comments. That's my only problem. Far too many comments and trying to find these can take a while. No, not that one. Well, this was going to be easy. God, how far back is it? This may take a while trying to find it. Oh, that's all. Some genetic snips. As you can see, I even go to Layla's. She's a good. Well, that was on some genetic snips that we were talking about. Still waiting for her to get back to me. She's busy as a nurse. We'll do something and talk about some genetics and stuff like that, which some people may find very interesting. Yeah, I don't know where it is. I'll have to find it. There are certain foods like squid and others that have basically got good copper to zinc ratios and all that, and actually can help with the sort of the balance that you want within your stored iron and your free iron and stuff like that. So, and people react differently. There are certain genetics as well. And it's not only hemochromatosis, but some other genetics as well that play a role. And, that's a very long conversation in that regard to sort of tease out properly. So it's a bit more complicated than that, mate. But I will put something together eventually that will go into that. Yes, Shell, coconut water is definitely nasty, nasty stuff. Best to be avoided. Look, a lot of people have been sucked into, like yourself, Luke, sucked into the sort of coconut sort of madness in that regard without knowing that the dangers of the water component. It's quite. Oh, thanks, mate. Yes. You lost track of time. Yeah. Anyway, you can watch it live. Thanks for participating. Look, Frank's got good information, and he puts a lot of effort into it. He's got the time, but he does put a lot of effort into really making good polished clips, and very informative. And everything's got its place, and he's really good about talking about the foods, the sort of composition of those foods, things that are in there, in those foods and stuff like that. And that's very time consuming. People don't realize. I mean, I did the chromium one, and I just realized how damn time consuming it was to try and find all this information, put it and show it in, and put it into a certain order. But it was one that had to be done, because obviously it's something that needs to be understood, how people can, improve their GLUT4 receptors, and works both ways, both for vitamin C, but also for like Stephanie today was talking about trying to keep glucose at a much lower gradient. Yeah, chromium plays a big role, and there are important foods. That's why I steer people towards things like eggs, and certain seafoods, because they'll add that additional chromium. They'll make your cells work better in actually taking up vitamin C, and also taking up any glucose. So you're basically in that much lower gradient of the Randall cycle. So yeah, they're all little biohacks, and that's the importance. But what things are in foods and stuff like that, and special food types and stuff like that, the sort of culinary, the sort of that sort of, because Frankie was on Master Chef, and he was doing all that. So he has a bit of background when it comes to food preparation, food items, food sourcing. And so he has much, wider, deeper knowledge when it comes to animal foods, and, their value, and how you can incorporate them in your diet and stuff like that. So he's got a lot of good information there. Everybody's, in the carnivore community has got different approaches. I mean, mine's more genomics, genetics, where have you come from, different regions, how these things are going to react to you, the subatomic world, how that works. I'm more interested in those sort of things, and they have their value in helping, people in their own way, in that regard. You're welcome, mate. Look, they're good foods, squid has another thing. It's very high in things like choline. So cholesterol and choline, is really important, especially for exporting fat out. So if you're not getting enough choline, people can do like a diet, like a carnivore diet, that may be slightly suboptimal in its choline. And if it's slightly suboptimal in its choline, well, you could potentially on a carnivore diet get small levels of fatty liver, because you need choline to export, the fat out. So, and some people, they may have a sensitivity to eggs, or just literally hate animal organs. So if you don't like organ meats and stuff like that, squid's your next option, so you can incorporate more squid into your diet. So that's another element there that you could use as well. I did look into this one. Speaking of the blood levels, your B12 was recently curious why it's so high. Can't seem to find good info saying what's truly a high level. Okay. There's a bit of information that I've come across now. I actually had the information, but I didn't realize I had the information. Let me just go to the PDF in one of my folders. I have just show you what I bloody mean. Oh, it's flickering. Anyway, you can see here a whole lot. Apes, ApoE, B12, the elevated part, and some other. So get rid of that. Is it going to come up on the damn wrong screen? Oh, bloody hell. Over here. Belgium Hospital. So it's about disorders, metabolic disorders that they're focused on. The pathophysiology of elevated vitamin B12 in clinical practice. So they actually look at the sort of things that can actually cause this sort of stuff, and it's usually abnormalities and things like liver disease can cause it, kidney failure, liver metastases, which is basically cancer in that regard. And these are sort of proliferative, a bit like leukemia. It's hard to pronounce. Blood disorders, proliferative blood disorders, and the sort of disorders that can actually happen with people that are susceptible to leukemia type things. So what actually happens is, and they've looked at this hypercholesterolemia, and focused on sort of the disorders that can actually happen within the liver itself and the dumping of that excess B12. There was another lady last time on this channel, and she actually asked me a question, and I couldn't actually answer it. And I said, I'll look into it. And her doctor had no idea either, her GP, in my last stream that I looked into it. And I didn't realize I had this study because I actually had a link to it, but I hadn't actually even downloaded it. It was just in I've got a little list of all the different damn studies, and I actually get I get just one study after another study after another study. I mean, you just have to look at bloody my emails and all that. What was that? Oh, that was another study that I sent from my work machine. I think that was a Chinese study that I sent to Bart. So I'm always, and it's another horrendous amount of list of things that I sort of get that I haven't actually even looked into. I didn't realize it was one in my list to look at. And so I did a bit of a search in my email account and found it. And so I said, oh, shit, already had it there, but I hadn't actually looked into it. As my other ones that I want to actually look into it, which is a long bloody list of things to look into. So there are definitely seems that sort of homocysteine issues are sort of also elevated, and there seems to also be some sort of damage or dysfunction in the liver in that regard. So and these people sort of present sort of an anemic sort of state as well. And they've actually looked at these liver sort of dysfunctions back in the 1930s, even some of the research. I'm not going to go through the whole study now, but I'm just trying to, let me just move that up there, 1930s, but there are definitely disorders of the liver that can actually create that. Now, things like milk thistle, things can sort out some of these disorders of these FXR enzymes in the liver. There's sort of other disorders that have to do with cirrhosis type damage in the liver that can dump B12 and also vitamin A as well, retinol, into the bloodstream. So there's a lot of those sort of liver disorders that actually are causing these sort of things. People like that consume a lot of alcohol. So people that are on a very on a diet alcohol, something that I was on years ago. It's not a good thing. And I think the lady was Bloom something garden or whatever that she actually asked that question. I hope she actually watches this and gets the info and goes and gets herself checked and goes and checks her liver, kidneys, and her organs to make sure that everything's actually working properly. So yeah. And I actually said something along those lines that it could be a disorder, but I feel a bit guilty at the moment that I didn't actually give it. I didn't actually check, and I just hope she actually watches this and looks at the information, and then just proactively, because there's liver cancer as well, and goes and gets herself checked out as soon as possible and finds out what's going on. Yes. I may check her channel later on and actually, I don't whether she's got I have to remember what her actual name is. I don't whether she's got she may not even have an email there. So it's just something that I have to do after this. So if you get some sort of unusual type readings of that sort or whatever, get yourself checked out. Definitely. You need a blood test, scanning, and all sorts of other things. It's good to have some people from Canada, not only Jared. And you're welcome. And good night as well. Look, eggs are, one of the best sources: cholesterol, choline, retinol, arachidonic acid, all sorts of things. So, let's not forget, arachidonic acid, the omega-6 from animal sources, is just as important as omega-3s, DHA. As I said, the component of your brain, which is that third component, which is PUFA, pretty much more than 50% is actually arachidonic acid, more than 50%. And less than 50% is DHA. So, that's the lady, Gardenia in Bloom. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I know I said something along those lines, and I really feel a bit guilty that I just, it's a week that's gone past, and she's not on today, and I'm a bit concerned, and I feel a bit guilty myself that I just didn't spend a bit more time. And I had the damn study, and I just shit happens sometimes. Yep. On the eggs are fantastic superfood as far as I'm concerned, and people are just not getting enough in that regard. And it's much easier for people to consume eggs than liver for a lot of people. Eggs also like poached, just heating up quite a bit. I do put a bit of vinegar in sometimes with my boiled eggs, but with my poached I don't. And I just try to get the temperature up and then drop them in so they don't splatter and sort of deform completely. And yeah, I sort of really enjoy those, and then just break them over my sort of my steak and put a bit of turmeric and salt and pepper. Mm, yes, making me hungry. Nope. Look, in terms of, I used to use low dose aspirin. As terms of platelet aggregation, it's useful, but just go and earth yourself. The effects don't last that long. The bark that the natural form that actually aspirin is derived from, in large amounts isn't really unhealthy, but in small amounts can actually have the same effect as aspirin, and it doesn't have the side effects of aspirin. One of the side effects of aspirin, which I found out, is that when it goes into your lungs, the little hairline structures that are at the surface of your lungs, and I forget what sort of pericellular matrix name that has, because that's what they call, all those little hairline structures are called pericellular matrix. In the endothelial cells in your arteries are called glycocalyx, but I forget the name in the actual lungs of the pericellular matrix. But it actually collapses, and that's not a good thing for good lung functioning long term. If you assault, I mean, it's not severe or extreme, but if you've got already some lung related issues or disorders or whatever, and you're assaulting your lungs even more, no. And there are better ways of actually getting life extension or hormetic effects with other substances than aspirin. It's overrated. There are other ways of actually breaking down fibrinogen and the clotting factors. There are plenty of others. I mean, retinol actually is an anti-fibrinogen substance as well. So animal fats, and not only that, they actually regulate those things much better. It's like vitamin C. It goes in there as an antioxidant. You give yourself too much, it ends up as a pro-oxidant and then has to be turned into an oxalate. Yeah, overrated in that regard. Don't do it to yourself. Love your lungs. You probably need them, into old age. Oops, wrong one. All the markers. Besides the high LDL, HDL, do you try, in terms of tests and stuff like that, Harriet actually asked, did a liver scan a couple of years ago. Everything looked good. That's the main thing, As long as you're getting enough choline to export fat out of your liver, you're not going to have an issue. Really, choline is, what I usually say is, if you're choline deficient, I don't care what diet you're on, you're going to end up with fatty liver. You need choline to export fat out of your liver. It can't happen any other way. And if you're like me, poor bastard like me, with so many genetic SNPs that, I can't produce it endogenously, I can't convert it, I can't do all sorts of things. I have to get it from the diet. Otherwise, I will end up with quite severe fatty liver in the past. So, yes, those are the sort of things, LDL, HDL, irrelevant. Triglycerides, irrelevant. All that irrelevant. Basically, they will go up, they'll go down, they'll go different ways. As long as they're native and not oxidized or damaged, they will vary depending on the diet that you're consuming. So, if you consume more carbohydrates, you'll export more triglycerides, VLDL out of your liver. If you're basically exercising heavily, you'll also from your adipose tissue, your fat cells. You'll export more triglycerides, and they'll be repackaged into VLDL and pushed out from the liver into the bloodstream and around, circulating around the body, providing energy for the cells. So most of these panels, just because we can measure them, do we need to? They tell you nothing, And even people that are completely healthy can have different responses to fatty acids, to creating different levels of HDL, because it has to do with the receptors, and receptors are hardwired genetically in many people. So, it's a far more complex picture. This is why we have hyper responders and people like that, because it's a very complex picture in terms of the lipid profile of people and the way they respond. I can eat the same thing as you in the same amount of quantity, because in order to measure something properly, you have to take into account the tissue size of yourself and the tissue size of mine, and appropriately, provide those exact nutrients to see how the response will happen in that regard. So that tells you something about some of the studies, when there are people that are shorter, taller, fatter, thinner, or whatever, different sized, that basically are given the same amount. How are you going to get the same response? But you look at veterinary science, and veterinary science basically looks at the animal as its size. And even the supplementation is determined by its size, how much you give of the different nutrients. Our RDIs don't even take that into consideration. That's why they're so wrong. There's just so much nonsense, official nonsense. It's just crazy. If you're eating, species-specific diet, you'll be fine. But at the same time, I say, look at you. You may have to optimize certain factors. You may have to look at some of the genetics, to see, do you have certain, like MTHFR? Do you have certain types of, choline-related genes, or certain fatty acid type genes? I mean, I've got two that will convert LA and ALA, the plant forms of the omega-3s and 6s, very easily. Many other people don't. And that creates a whole lot of other issues and dysregulation in the body, in terms of not only the conversion, but also resident time of certain things that are not being, utilized in a certain way by the body. There's all sorts of issues. There's so many variations. And that's why I usually say to people, find out your genetics, or look at what your ancestors ate. And that's very important, to sort of focus on that. And as we go along, I'll be looking at different types of aspects of genetics and going into them and sort of explaining their ramifications. And then people that are interested in going that next level in their genomics adventure, let's call it an adventure, sounds better, will be able to look at how to optimize even their carnivore diet in a certain way that actually works better with their genetics. At the end of the day, that's what's going to give us a more vibrant long-term life than anything else. Hopefully, I hope she does. I sort of am worried about, because I didn't see today, and so I'm a bit concerned. I hope she's still okay. Since I found that study, I sort of, you're welcome, mate. I sort of have been thinking, bloody hell, I hope she's on the live stream, and I hope she actually all sees this live stream as well, and then takes some proactive steps in getting herself checked, and trying to find out what her state of liver is, or whether it's hopefully it's not it's not cancerous or anything like that. But even benign growths can also cause this as well. Somewhere in the study, I can't remember now where, but even benign type issues can actually cause this. So there's a couple of states and all that. Yeah, look, like she was surprised that her GP had no real answer. You know, I mean, I'd actually said something along these lines that I can't remember whether it's where exactly on, whether it was one with Bart that I was doing or whatever, and talked about some dysregulation in the actual what was it? In different organs and stuff like that, and certain biomarkers that you can get in the body. Yeah, but yeah, and I actually said something along those lines, but I just, you know, when you're in the thick of it, so to speak, you don't think. Yeah, I hope she gets some help. Yeah, because that can be, those sort of things can be really dangerous, and if they get legs and sort of, you know, progress, that can be a worrying thing. Yes. Close to the end, aren't we? Any last minute sort of questions people want to ask, or anything they want to bring up about anything in that regard? Thank you. Yeah, was there anything with the I think one thing that I didn't actually make a comment on Bart's thing about the doctors and Paul Saladino and all that. Did pretty well, but there's in those sort of venues when we're challenged, it can sometimes be a bit hard if you're not used to that environment to basically respond and think of things that you can argue against. I think it was good that Paul actually used the argument with Stefansson and that, but I think he should have pressed these indigenous populations and said, hold on a sec. We've got the Inuit, we've got the Maasai, we've got from the Manchurian Mongol plains right through steppes right through to the Central Asian plains, where we've got all these populations that are highly carnivorous, diets for multiple generations. It's the Western sad diet, vegan diet that Dr. Con was actually promoting and all that. It's they that are fad diets that are very recent, that don't have multiple generations behind them. And they are the ones that have actually, the high plant-based ones, that have actually shown the greatest level of disease in the last 50 years. That's how it should have been hammered. Sometimes, I mean, I was in student politics and all that, and I'm a bit of a propagandist, and so I know how to argue these sort of things a bit better and how to go after people, find their weaknesses and literally just hammer them on those weaknesses. That's what the vegans do. They use the same strategies. Some of these are kids who are out of student politics, and they know how to use the same techniques. You find the weakness of your opponent and you just hammer it until you get some blood. It's not the sort of, I don't enjoy that sort of stuff. I did when I was young, because you're a bit rebellious and you want to stick it to the man, so to speak, because that's how we are when we're very young. Once we get a bit older and we become a bit more, let's say, more placid or easygoing, and we realize that to have good relationships with people are more important than basically just sticking it to people. Yes, but those are the sort of tactics sometimes you've got to employ in those sort of circumstances, because it doesn't work any other way. I think I know what you mean. Just trying to remember what the levels are. Mate of mine, his father had prostate cancer. So look, prostate, really, let me put it this way. Prostate issues really emerge because his father, he used to consume a lot of sort of like soft drinks and stuff like that. Slight elevation isn't that much of an issue, as long as you don't have, because usually people that have got these issues, they've got urination problems, they've got high estrogen levels. They tend to have sometimes even gout, high uncontrolled uric acid and stuff like that. There's a lot of factors. It's a bit more complicated, and whether PSA is the gold standard thing, I don't really know, and I don't really think we have enough. I'm not going to basically say that it's a poor marker or that it's a good marker, because really we don't know. Honestly, to be honest, I don't know. And I don't think, and I mean, I did ask my doctor once, and he said he didn't really know. I pressed him on it, and this was, we were actually playing poker at the time. Yeah, I do play poker with my doctor. Well, I used to. I haven't played now for ages. Texas Hold'em. And I don't know how we got into prostate and all that. I think he was trying to suss me out or something, because one of my friends, because his father, had the sort of issue, and he was bringing it up, and I'm going, what sort of bloody conversation is this right in the middle of a game? I think I lost that round as well. Fuck, he must have psyched me out somehow. But yeah, look, even he couldn't really, when I pinned him down, I said, is this the best marker? And he said, well, it's the only marker that we really have. So I think it's more complicated in that regard. There are other things that are probably in combination that are probably driving things. I don't think, you can just go on the PSA value alone. Yeah, I think, also you really, I mean, if you're having problems urinating, you've got a problem. But if you've got an elevated PSA, but you don't have any issues, urination problems or anything like that, maybe do an ultrasound, see what state it's in, could be in the early stages. Yeah, it's really hard to answer that, because it's like a lot of these things, like the LDL, the HDL, or this or that or whatever. There's so much differences with genetics. There's so much difference in people's diets and lifestyles and things. And I mean, even the way you actually go to the toilet, that can actually have an effect on the prostate as well. Yeah, it's, I mean, sort of the way Asians sort of, go to the toilet in that little hole and all that, and they sort of, crouch down and stuff like that. That's actually healthier, both for the prostate and for, generally, for better functioning of those things, rather than just sitting on a toilet seat. You can actually get it like a stool where you can elevate your legs, which is also helpful as well if you're on a toilet. It's because what I notice is that, in my travels in Asia, the issues of prostate and prostate cancer and enlarged prostate wasn't really an issue until, high fructose type food started coming in to Southeast Asia. People couldn't, especially in the Muslim areas where you can't drink alcohol. Soft drinks just took off like wildfire. So I think that it's a marker to keep an eye on, but is it the only thing? No. I mean, sometimes these sort of, like hormones, they can, get out of whack for some reason or whatever. It doesn't mean necessarily they may go back to normal sort of levels. There can be other factors. It's like certain things in the environment can actually elevate things. Look, it's one of those questions where you're never going to get a definitive answer. I mean, if you're worried, go and get yourself a scan, because at least seeing the damn thing is much better than just looking at a number. It's like basically doing a CAC, and seeing whether you've got coronary calcium in those arteries, or whether just because you've got an LDL elevated. So you really want to see those sort of things. Then there are issues like fat deposits in certain soft tissue that can actually happen, calcium deposits, all sorts of things that can throw off some of these tests. So it's probably a good idea to go and get some sort of scan to be able to see what's really happening there, in a sense. And it's probably not going to be it won't be an ultrasound. It'll be, because that's too soft, the tissue around there. They usually just put you in an MRI, in one of those sort of general scanner, like an MRI or something like that. I don't think they actually use, because the tissue is too soft, and it's also close to the bladder, and they don't really want to do that too close to the bladder. From memory, that was when I had my kidney issues and stuff like that. I could sort of vaguely remember some of that sort of stuff. Yes. You just want quiet when you get older. Yeah, sort of. Well, I'm probably not the normal older person. I actually enjoy still partying a bit when I go into Asia. I like to hit the nightclubs as well. So I wouldn't say I'm, completely over the hill yet. Hopefully not. But look, I do like my quiet moments, but also, I'm sort of a bit like a chameleon in that regard. I like both, or Jekyll and Hyde, to be more precise. Literally Jekyll and Hyde, especially when I've had a few drinks. So, but not in the nasty way. I just become more humorous. In that regard, I become less evil and more cracking jokes and being ultra funny and sometimes very un-PC, as my partner keeps reminding me when I've had a few too many. Yes, less discretion. You're welcome, mate. It's those sort of things, you sort of have to test and check a bit more, just to be on the safe side. There are a whole lot of factors that can be at play. Sometimes just can be an unusual reading, nothing to be worried about. So it's not a scam, but it's not an accurate. It's not the only thing that you need to do in that regard. I'll leave that as a comment. I definitely do. You got to. I mean, otherwise life becomes very boring in that regard. Anyway, I think we'll stop it here. We're nearly getting close to 3 hours. I did enjoy myself. Um, I didn't sleep as well last night because I actually went very late to bed. I was up at my sister's place. We ended up watching another damn movie, and it sort of ventured after 12 into 1 o'clock and beyond. And by the time I got home and got to bed, and the heat and all that sort of stuff, that's why I was sort of struggling. I sort of missed Pim's beginning of hers, and I sort of was dragging myself out, sort of half awake, heading to where's the toilet, sort of. That was the only thing on my mind at that moment, and yeah, so I was a bit out of it, and I'm not as energetic today. I sort of feel from probably too much ice cream. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I'm not going to do that next week. Yeah. Bloody hell. I got a challenge from my friend. He said he's going to go for the other one. So he sort of, and then I went for the other vanilla. We get this sort of it's a local one, which is a low sugar one. So it's more dairy, dairy based, and even the one down here that I get is a dairy based one as well. So there's no seed oils or anything like that, because you definitely don't want to touch those. I mean, a lot of the ice creams out there are not really ice creams. They're actually full of seed oils, and they combine these skim powders of skim milk and seed oils and other vegetable type fats and stuff like that. They're just basically a brew of nastiness. So you don't want to touch that at all. But I have made my own ice cream from just dairy products, which is then a sort of a purely carnivore type ice cream in a sense. But it's time consuming. That's the only problem. It's a bit of a hassle in that regard. But yes, it's something that people you can buy nowadays. You can actually buy very inexpensive machines, so ice cream making machines, and it's an option. Especially if you've got young kids and they like ice cream, and you definitely don't want to be buying the supermarket stuff, which is full of seed oils. That's a better option. Get the dairy and make your own. And much safer for them as well in that regard. Just cycle through these quickly. Oops, wrong one. This one. It's always the damn thing with this when you go try and get the next one down, because you have to sort of like move in the StreamYard thing. You can click on the previous one. It doesn't sort of detach itself sometimes, in a way. Oops, further down. Yep. Thanks, mate. Yeah, I know. A night of indiscretion. So, yes, in a sense. But I mean, I still you got to sometimes have a bit. As I said, I'm 95%. I'm not always 100% and all that. And I mean, none of us can be. And none of us want to be Puritans like the vegans. That's just idiotic. As long as the majority of our nutrition is coming from, that's right, exactly, mostly from animal products. That's the key thing to health. Plenty of populations like the Okinawans and many other populations that still consume a certain level of carbohydrate. It's low glycemic. It's small amount. They do more physical work, yes, and all that. There are other factors in play, cultural factors, more fasting and time restricted feeding, and also calorie restricted feeding to mitigate a lot of the deleterious effect of sugar. But we don't want to become like we definitely don't want to become like the vegans, ideologically, welded to, this very narrow approach and all that. Yes, exactly. Because otherwise we'll turn into carnitards, which is just another extreme type thing. All we have to remind ourselves and remind other people is that meat is the most nutritious and optimal food that we can actually have. Some indiscretions here and there aren't going to kill us, but then there are some other elements, and we need to balance things out in that regard. Anyway, guys, I'll let you go. Thank you for being here today, and participating in the live feed. Please, anybody that hasn't actually subscribed, please subscribe, and also like this stream. It all sort of counts, the more numbers you get and all that. It sort of allows for more people to become aware of it, and it gets promoted. It's all about the amount of viewing time and likes and subscribes and all that in the end, make the channel more viable, especially in the future. YouTube are looking at culling channels, and, if I don't grow, they may cull me out of the environment. It's at the end of the day, for them, it's a profit. If you're not being viewed by many people, they're not enough commercials to be had from your content. They will become more ruthless in the future. You're welcome. That's just the part of that reality. And luckily, I don't have to rely for income on YouTube, but I've got my day job, and so in that regard, I do this for the community. I do this for you guys. Get out there, try to put some information out there, try to help people. I'm a sufferer myself with past cardiovascular disease, and so that's the only reason I'm here. Pretty much to try and disseminate some information and look up things for people when I'm not sure about something, or and try and help them in their own journey to better health. Because ultimately we're all on a journey, and the best thing we can do is just help each other to get to better health. Because it's a struggle for a lot of people, and some other people are in a much more disadvantaged position than ourselves, and that's hard. So anyway, goodbye, good night, or good day, or good afternoon, or wherever you are on this planet. See you, and thanks for being here today. Okay, bye, guys.